The sterile scent of disinfectant, usually so familiar, felt particularly sharp tonight. Dr. Evelyn Reed, her shoulders aching from a long day on the surgical rotation, stared at the duty roster board. Another night shift, but not just any night shift. Tonight, someone had called in sick, and the dreaded night duty for the ER was open. Most interns ducked their heads, but Evelyn, with a quiet sigh, picked up the marker. She needed the experience, the extra shifts. It was a chance to prove herself, even if it meant sacrificing precious sleep. This was her life now, a constant negotiation with fatigue and the relentless demands of healing. The hospital at night had a different pulse. Quieter, yes, but also more profound, as if the very air hummed with unseen anxieties and hushed hopes. Evelyn made her way to the staff elevators, her worn backpack slung over one shoulder. Her destination, the emergency department on the ground floor. She pressed the G button, but as the doors silently glided shut, a peculiar thing happened. The panel flickered, and a button she'd never noticed before, tucked away almost invisibly below the 12, suddenly illuminated. The number 13. A ripple of unease traced its way down her spine. Hospitals, she knew, were often superstitious about the 13th floor, often skipping it in numbering. But here it was, glowing with an eerie, soft light. Before she could react, before she could even process the oddity, the elevator began its ascent, bypassing her intended ground floor destination. Up, up it went, past the familiar numerical sequence, past 10, 11, 12, and then, with a gentle thud, it settled. The doors whispered open. Evelyn stepped out, her hand still hovering over the door close button, a silent plea for the familiar to return. What greeted her was not the bustling fluorescent-lit corridors of the general hospital. This hallway was dim, lit by a series of low-wattage bulbs, casting long, unsettling shadows. The air was cool, almost stagnant, carrying a faint, musty scent she couldn't quite place. And then she saw them. Lined neatly against both walls, as far as her eyes could discern in the gloom, stood dozens upon dozens of wheelchairs. Not scattered, not abandoned, but arranged with a chilling precision. They were all empty, yet they faced her. Every single one. Their polished metal gleamed faintly, their dark seat seeming to absorb the little light available. It was as if she had walked into an assembly of silent, expectant spectators. The silence itself was the loudest sound, a heavy, oppressive blanket. Her heart began to pound, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. She took a tentative step forward, then another, her gaze sweeping across the rows of waiting chairs. There was no sign of a nurse's station, no directional signs, no sounds of life. No calls for assistance, no hurried footsteps, no distant chatter of staff. Just the quiet, watchful presence of the wheelchairs. She turned back to the elevator, a desperate hope blooming in her chest. She jabbed at the G button, then any other button, her finger pressing harder and harder. Nothing. The buttons remained stubbornly unlit, unresponsive. The digital display above the door remained fixed on 13. The elevator, her only connection to the world she knew, seemed to have vanished, leaving her stranded in this unsettling, silent gallery. A cold knot of fear tightened in her stomach. This wasn't right. This wasn't any part of St. Jude's Hospital I knew. Had she sleepwalked into a dream, a nightmare? She pinched herself hard. The sharp sting was real. The cool metal of the nearest wheelchair felt real under her trembling fingertips. She decided she couldn't just stand there. With a deep, shaky breath, Evelyn began to walk down the hall, her footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the profound quiet. Each wheelchair seemed to watch her, their presence a suffocating weight. She peered into the few closed doors she passed, their windows opaque, offering no glimpse inside. What kind of patients would be here? Why were all these wheelchairs lined up? The questions circled in her mind, each more chilling than the last. She called out, her voice barely a whisper. "Hello? Is anyone here?" The silence swallowed her words whole, leaving only the faint reverberation of her own terror. The air grew colder, and she shivered, pulling her scrubs tighter around her. She was a doctor, trained to be rational, to analyze, to diagnose. But there was no diagnosis for this, no rational explanation. The hallway stretched on, seemingly endless, the wheelchairs a never-ending guard of honor. She peered into the few closed doors she passed, their windows opaque, offering no glimpse inside. What kind of patients would be here? Why were all these wheelchairs lined up? The questions circled in her mind, each more chilling than the last. She called out, her voice barely a whisper. "Hello? Is anyone here?" The silence swallowed her words whole, leaving only the faint reverberation of her own terror. The air grew colder, and she shivered, pulling her scrubs tighter around her. She was a doctor, trained to be rational, to analyze, to diagnose. But there was no diagnosis for this, no rational explanation. The hallway stretched on, seemingly endless, the wheelchairs a never-ending guard of honor. She thought she saw a faint shimmer at the very end of the corridor, a suggestion of light. Hope, fragile but persistent, nudged her forward. Perhaps it was another elevator or an exit sign, a way back to the logical, predictable world. As she approached the distant light, she realized it wasn't a window or another elevator. It was a large, ornate mirror, reflecting the long, empty hallway and the silent army of wheelchairs. And in the reflection, standing right behind her, was a figure. Not a solid corporeal being, but a translucent, flickering silhouette. It was a patient, draped in a hospital gown, their face obscured, but their posture spoke of immense weariness. The figure slowly raised a hand, pointing not at Evelyn, but at one of the empty wheelchairs near the mirror. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it faded, dissolving into the dimness. Evelyn spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Nothing, just the rows of empty wheelchairs stretching back into the shadows. She looked back at the mirror. The reflection was clear, undisturbed, showing only her own terrified face and the endless corridor. The silent figure, the pointing hand, it had been a fleeting message, a spectral invitation. She looked at the wheelchair the figure had pointed to. It was identical to the others, yet somehow, now, it seemed to possess a subtle gravitas. It wasn't about escape, she realized with a chilling certainty. It was about waiting. This wasn't a floor for the living, or at least not the fully living. This was a transition point, a place where the final journey began, perhaps for those who had waited too long, whose stories linger untold. Evelyn didn't sit in the chair, she couldn't, but the profound understanding of the place settled upon her like a shroud. This was a floor of quiet departures, of last lingering moments, unseen by the bustling world below. The wheelchairs weren't watching her, they were waiting with her for something or someone. She didn't know how she would leave, or if she ever would. But in that moment, the fear subsided, replaced by a strange, quiet reverence. She was no longer just an intern, but a witness, standing on the threshold of something beyond her medical understanding. The night stretched ahead, an unknown expanse. The hum of the hospital, usually a distant comfort, was now entirely absent, replaced by the profound silence of this waiting room for souls. Evelyn, the eager intern, found herself contemplating a form of care far beyond IV drips and diagnostic tests. She was now a quiet presence, listening to the echoes of unseen goodbyes, bathed in the soft, watchful glow of the 13th floor. This story about Dr. Evelyn Reed and her unexpected journey reminds us that even in the most familiar settings, there can be hidden depths, untold stories, and places that challenge our understanding of reality. It's a reminder to stay open, to observe, and sometimes just to listen to the quiet whispers of the world around us. What do you think happened to Evelyn? Have you ever encountered a place that felt like it existed outside of time or logic? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story intriguing, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more tales, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the unknown. Thank you for listening.